I am Steve Assie, Head of Canada for Thomson Reuters. Thomson Reuters is committed to informing the way forward by delivering trusted content and technology that professionals and institutions need to make the right decisions. In Canada, we are pleased to support the legal community and the startup professionals that it serves. This is why today I'm excited to host a Prairie Tech panel of startup founders from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Saskatoon has a growing population of 342,000 residents. Its growth today, in large part, comes from international immigration. This city is known for its good quality of life, higher educational opportunities, and industrious workforce. These are the ingredients for a startup community, and the city of Saskatoon, province of Saskatchewan, and Prairie provinces more broadly are home to a flourishing tech startup community. In the panel conversation today, we will talk about what it's like to build a technology startup in the prairies. We will hear about the legal needs that startup founders have along their journey. We will also talk about the future of the Prairie Tech community and how evolving legal technology may better support the needs of this community. My guests on the panel today are Rachel Drew, CEO of Cadence. Cadence is an intelligent estate planning and settlement platform. It equips professionals to forge strong, meaningful relationships with their clients by facilitating end-of-life planning and guiding estate settlement. Then we have Tom Ross, CEO of Andgo Systems. Andgo specializes in intelligent automation. It helps organizations solve cumbersome scheduling practices by turning them into automated, configurable workflows. And last but not least, we have Joe Gill, partner at McKercher LLP. Joe specializes in technology law, capital raising, and tax, with a particular focus on high-growth technology startups, IT contracting for companies, managing digital transformation, and tax structuring for private enterprises and professionals. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us,
Thank
Stephen.
you for having us.
Yeah, this is great. I'm looking forward to this. Rachel and Tom, maybe I'll start with you if you don't mind. Can you each talk about your background prior to founding your current company? And Rachel, maybe I'll look to you first.
Sure, happy to. So Cadence is actually the second company that I've started. And fortunately, with Joe's help, I have sold my other business at the end of last year. So really, it's been full circle for me starting my other business in occupational health and safety management. So much different than estate settlement and administration. So definitely a big shift in gears, but really, being an entrepreneur, when you find something that you're passionate about and you want to pursue, it's definitely not too much of a challenge to change directions.
That's great. And Tom, you?
Yeah, absolutely. So born and raised here in Saskatchewan. I grew up here, went to school here, live here with my family here now. As far as the entrepreneur journey, kind of started that right out of university. Had a company that we focused on some digital online registration back at the time. And then from there kind of moved into some other firms in and around Saskatoon. I met my co-founder, Eric Frederickson, working at a digital agency. And a few years after that, we got together, connected, and had this opportunity before us in terms of what would eventually turn into Andgo Systems. And so we got started on that journey back in 2014. Little did we know exactly how it would unfold or how it has unfolded, but it's been all good ever since. So
I love that. And Tom, maybe I'll stay with you for just a minute. Can you talk a little bit about what Andgo does? I gave a brief intro, but it didn't do it justice. Can you build out what the company does?
Yeah, you bet. So Andgo Systems, what we're doing is staffing automation processes. And to kind of characterize it, when we first got started, we had a customer, and the problem that the customer was trying to solve was that they worked in healthcare. And every day, this healthcare organization, very large employer, 15,000 employees, they would have 300 of them call in sick every day. Every day they would have a room full of administrators receiving these sick calls, updating schedules, notifying managers, and kind of working through all the different processes to incorporate these absences into the system on a manual one-to-one basis. Once that was done, because it was healthcare, you needed to find replacements to come in in order to care for the patients. And so then they would move to start working on filling these vacancies by calling out one-to-one, dialing phone numbers, listening to ringtones, asking folks if they're able to come into work to fill these shifts. And so we uncovered this problem and got to work on building some tools that could help sort of automate this. Now, being in healthcare, the processes are very particular, and then also with unionized environments, there's a lot of structure around how to do things in the right way. And so we began by building automation tools, rules engines that can help navigate this to ensure that these sick calls are received and being updated properly, as well as folks are being notified of eligible vacancies that they could work. And so this kind of created that positive impact that sort of took that 35-minute process to receive that sick call and boiled it down to about 2 minutes or less. And so since then, we were bootstrapped for the first kind of 8 years of our existence, and we just recently took on some institutional venture capital. That was back in 2022, and since then kind of expanded throughout Canada, expanded in the US, and have grown our team sort of significantly since those early days. So yeah, really focusing on that staffing automation, particularly in managing, the movement of staff day of for these large healthcare organizations.
And Tom, could you talk a little bit more about those large healthcare organizations? Like really, who is your target customer? Who could benefit the most from your product? Yeah,
great question. So when we talk about kind of healthcare providers, these are like these large employers. Think in Canada, like health authorities, health regions, hospital systems. They often employ thousands of employees. And so when these folks are unable to come into work, they call in sick, and it triggers all these kind of touch points that administrators have to go through. And sometimes it's actually the nursing managers and leaders that need to go through and sort of manage that. And so really what we're doing is really kind of understanding sort of that difference between scheduling and staffing. Scheduling is that perfectly laid out plan that's developed ahead of time, and staffing is your day of. That's where you're matching your employees to sort of the care requirements that may exist in that organization. And so the day of, there's a ton of variance that can occur unexpectedly, unplanned. And what we found was that variance is managed manually, which is kind of surprising, right? As we dive into it. And so that's what we're building tools for, is that staffing side. And so usually what we're looking at is the operation side of these healthcare organizations, particularly the staffing departments. These are the teams that are responsible for this day-to-day staffing, and this is what we equip them with tools to help them unlock more value, automate some of the busy work, and standardize these processes for their employees. And so as we've expanded into the US, we recognize that they get the same challenges down there. Coming out of the pandemic, coming out of COVID, we've all heard about the staffing crisis that exists, and sort of just the short staff that a lot of these organizations are trying to manage. And so with Andgo, we're able to help them, utilize their existing staff more effectively by creating some flexible access points, creating some extensions so that they can engage with their schedules, work when they want, work where they want, and give them some of this access to sort of help solve that problem. So we're really kind of extending what they have currently in place from a scheduling standpoint, and being able to create a lot of value in this much needed area as far as like that scheduling flexibility, that staffing flexibility, as far as supporting their needs and their care requirements that they have to give to their patients, and so kind of enabling that.
So if you're an operations professional in a mid to large size healthcare organization in Canada or the United States, this is something that you should look into.
Absolutely. Love the plug, Stephen. You got it. That's it.
Great. Rachel, I guess same question for you. Can you talk a little bit about what your new company, Cadence, does?
Yeah, absolutely. So really with Cadence, it came from a personal experience of loss myself. After my mom had died, I went through the estate administration process, and it was fragmented and what felt to be really broken to me. So anyone who's been through it, I'm sure, can understand exactly what I'm talking about. But really, you're dealing with hundreds of stakeholders, from, making sure the federal government knows about the death, the financial institutions, claiming insurance, going through probate, the list goes on. And it's one of those things that people are navigating it at likely one of the worst times of their life, when they've lost somebody who's incredibly close to them, because typically that person who is in the role of the executor is somebody who is really close to that person who has passed away. And so after going through that myself and just realizing how antiquated this whole entire process really is, and every stakeholder requires basically a different version of the same thing, and the pain that causes to individual people who have lost a loved one, it just became abundantly clear that this was a problem that really, really needed to be solved. And so that's why we created Cadence. And, many people on my team have also gone through similar experiences. And I'm sure most people watching this have experienced this or witnessed other people go through this. And so in building Cadence, we really wanted to focus on how much can we automate of this process and streamline, because a lot of it really is a knowledge issue. You have to understand the process for each individual organization and take those steps in order to do that. So, for example, notifying the credit bureaus requires something different than notifying the CRA, for example. And so we've really taken all of this information, compiled it in a really simple, easy to understand way, and are just continuing to automate as much of that process as we can. We do work with businesses, so we don't work typically directly with individuals, but we have businesses like funeral homes and wealth management firms who work with Cadence and provide it to their families and the clients that they're serving.
That's great. I mean, it's a horrible thing for anyone to have to go through, but at the same time, when they are going through that, they don't want to have to be trying to figure out all the paperwork involved. So you're definitely solving a very real need there. What is your partnership with the funeral homes and investment management firms look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do work directly with those business partners because, of course, when you think of the experience that a person goes through in loss, those are the typical touch points, dealing with their wealth manager and then also dealing with a funeral home, of course. And so in this way, we do sell directly to those businesses, and they provide the service to their clients as an extension of the services that they're already providing. And, fortunately for us, we work with companies that already do a really incredibly amazing job of looking after their clients and the families. But what we found is there is this gap in care. So basically, you're cared for and supported in the health system at the end of life, and then you're cared for and supported by the funeral home. And then often people are kind of left to navigate the complexities on their own, which is really not very valuable, especially from a business perspective too, because there's lost client relationships that can be strengthened in that way. So it's just been such a wonderful opportunity to be able to work with these companies that really do truly care about their clients and the experience they have, and understand the challenges that they're going to face. Because even for me, as an example, I didn't know what that next year after my mom died would look like.
Yeah.
But those professionals who support people during that, they do know, and they understand the problem deeper than even the individuals who've never been through it before. So it's just a perfect touch point, and just make sure that we're supporting the businesses. And of course, we have many other benefits that we provide to the business partners that we work with, in addition to just providing support to their families. So it's just such a great collaboration, and working with folks in that area has just been really, really rewarding for us.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like an absolute win-win, because these providers can help their end clients in an additional way, and that even broadens the relationship that they have with those families that they're working with. So
Yeah, and
it's a wonderful
so
service.
nice because we've also been able to work with a lot of law firms in the way, we're
That's
not
great.
doing legal work for people, but it's a really great way for us to connect people with the other support services they're going to need. So this can include lawyers, accountants, appraisers, real estate agents, the list goes on. And so it's also a really great way for us to connect our individuals who are using the platform with those professional services as well.
And do you serve businesses and individuals across Canada?
Actually, we service Canada and the US. We actually
That's
launched in the new year across the US as well. So we're available in all of the states.
Oh, that's great. Joe, I want to get to you in just a minute, but Rachel and Tom, one more question, because I know you've had rocket ship entrepreneurial journeys thus far. Can you brag a little bit, if I can pull that out of you? Can you share some recent organizational accomplishments that you're especially proud of? What has your team done recently that you want to highlight? And Tom, maybe I'll go to you first.
Totally. Yeah. So I like this question, because I think that's maybe one thing coming from Saskatchewan. A lot of these entrepreneurs are pretty humble, and so when you start talking about it, you realize all the amazing things. You're like, gosh, why aren't we talking more about this stuff? So I appreciate the question. So from Andgo, there's a couple things that jump out immediately. So we've got quite a bit of organizations that we're onboarding right now, that we're in the process of implementing, and we had a couple of big milestones that I'm happy to share. One of them is that we actually launched, and so we deal with large enterprise organizations, and so these are very complex projects that have a lot of stakeholders, and so there's a lot that goes into them. And so we went live with 2 customers on the same day back in July, which is just amazing as far as like an advancement of processes and being able to have the capacity and the tools and the equipment to have all this other stuff. And so that was a big milestone, just as like, hey, we've been able to, we have those customers able to go live, but then we had the capacity and execute. And they were very boring launches, which is very good news if you know, for all the tech folks in the audience here. And the other one I want to share is that, so we have a customer now that has a location, has a hospital that's located in London, UK. And so we are now live in the UK. So in addition to being live throughout North America, we have our first UK hospital using Andgo successfully. So
that's fantastic. You've gone global. I like it. Rachel, how about you?
Yeah, this is, as Tom had said, it's definitely something that we don't always take a lot of time to think about, but I know a few things that I was considering, you know, with the things that our team has done over the last, you know, we've only been around for 2 years, so we're still a really new, what I refer to as a baby company. But we have been able to raise more than $2.4 million in venture capital. And over 1.5 million in non-dilutive capital in this small amount of time. And also for us, because it is such a challenge when it comes to information, because everything is different in every single state and every province. And, you know, when you're thinking of thousands of stakeholders overall, from your digital accounts to, you know, government notifications and all that stuff, there's so much information. And so the fact that the team was able to build out a product that can actually function in every Canadian province and every US state is something that I certainly am proud of, because it was definitely a large feat for us to be able to build it out in that capacity and have the ability to expand across all of North America.
Absolutely. That's a rocket ship. That's great. Well, Joe, I want to bring you in now. Can you talk a little bit about your background? And then I'm particularly interested in hearing about, you know, what has made you so passionate about working with startup founders like Rachel and Tom?
Yeah, no, thank you, Stephen. And so, you know, like Tom kind of alluded to, Saskatchewan born and raised, same on that front. Had a commerce background before going to law school. Actually, if we really want to take things all the way back, apparently during elementary school, I thought I'd do a combination of computer science and writing so I could write the scripts for video games. So, you know, maybe we didn't end up too far off at the end of the day being a tech lawyer, but I always thought that was kind of interesting. But I started the lawyer game about 10 years ago. Always had an interest on corporations, working with small businesses in particular. My father owned a small business in Regina where I grew up, and that was a big sort of formative part of it. And then kind of started my career doing a mix of things, a lot of tax work on the front end and some public company corporate finance related work. And then it was about 2015, 2016 that I sort of decided, you know, we have a lot of small, medium-sized businesses in the province that we serve, and beyond that, even to other provinces and throughout Canada. And they always felt like an underserved market, particularly in professional services, because it's much easier to get an engagement with Big Co and saddle up and do all of Big Co's work until the end of time, versus sort of joining in from the beginning with somebody that maybe candidly can't pay you, or the issues are really complex for a company in the beginning, et cetera. And so we started down this path of saying, well, let's build something out for startups and for entrepreneurs. And that's really what I think started this whole journey where I ended up today. Is we said, look, we want to make a bet on people in the beginning when it's easy to not care, and maybe take a little bit of a shared risk, delayed gratification angle to things and join along for the ride. You see it here in the answers and the way that Tom and Rachel have just explained their businesses. There's something infectious about working with people that build something. It's no knock on executives or people who do a great job, a superb job managing some large companies. It's just different when you're building it from scratch, and when you're challenging the status quo, and when you're stepping outside of your comfort zone to build something new and something you have no idea if it's going to work out. And that statistically seems a little insane. I was kind of drawn to that. And so I think it was about 2017. I always use this as the inflection point of when people ask, you know, students or others, well, how'd you become a tech lawyer? I met a very passionate gentleman who would turn out to be the catalyst in many ways for the first technology incubator here in the province. The gentleman's name was Jordan Duchek. he was working on, I can't even remember what at the time, but he was just one of these people that you just kind of meet and you go, he's going to do something. I don't know what it is, but let's keep meeting every quarter and let's, have lunch, have a drink, have whatever, and let's check in. And that thing eventually turned into what's here in Saskatoon, the province's first business incubator, Collabs. And, I just sort of joke that I just kept showing up in rooms as the only lawyer in a room full of founders and engineers and computer scientists. And everybody just kind of adopted me at a certain point and went, okay, well, that's the token lawyer over there. We're not really sure why he's here, but, make friends with him. And so this morphed into just, ingratiating myself and trying to understand the community, like a community of doers and a community of resilient people who were going to, I don't think it's an understatement to say change the world. And I've always been drawn to that. I think that's exciting. I think that's fun. I like providing the legal services that provide some underpinning for this, but it's a wild journey, and I just want to do a small part and help people like Tom and Rachel along the way.
That's so cool. And I just love here that we have two examples of Saskatchewan-born companies that have gone international and are doing fantastically well at different phases of your journey. But Joe, I'm curious about your thoughts, and Tom and Rachel, please jump in as well. Just on the tech startup community in the prairies, what is it? How would you describe that community? How large is it? Can you talk a little bit about some of the great things that you've seen come out of the community so far? It's something I'm interested in as someone who's also from Saskatoon. So please just talk a little bit about what the startup community is like in the province.
I'll start and offer up some stats, and for the viewers who aren't familiar with our great province, in 2018 we had a fairly exhaustive labor market impact assessment of the technology industry, and we have some numbers. They haven't quite been updated. I know it's in the pipeline to get some additional, more updated numbers, but I think this just underscores where things were at 2018, and it's certainly accelerated from there. I mean, back at that time, we had about just over $10 billion of technology sector revenue here in Saskatchewan, which is not a very huge province in and of itself. There were about 52,000 workers that were employed in the tech sector. It accounted for about 6% of Saskatchewan's total GDP. And if you looked at total fiscal impact, as far as money in the government coffers, it was about $1.3 billion. And there were other statistics that go on from that said it was a great place to live as far as the trade-offs between great jobs, great salaries, and a reasonable cost of living. And again, I don't have the recent numbers on top of that, but certainly it's continued to grow. Companies have continued to hire. We've certainly had no shortage of dreamers and individuals looking to start up companies. We have a consistent pipeline of, I think it's the old Steve Jobs quote, the crazy ones. And so it's, again, I would say it's a great community of supports. And that's always been a real strength that I've observed as a community member. There's lots of organizations all working together, all coordinating, trying to help companies like Tom and Rachel's become a global force.
Just to jump in on what you're saying there, Joe, absolutely. Like, I've certainly felt and experienced this firsthand, just as far as the ecosystem here and other companies reaching out, and that there's a number of companies that are further ahead on their growth path than we are. And so, when you're looking for advice, I know how many times I've reached out to Catherine at Coconut, Jordan at Seven Shifts and things like that. And they've always been willing to help and have a quick conversation. And it's just some interesting perspective as far as folks that have been there, done that. And so incredibly supportive. And I think that's maybe that prairie mentality of being, helpful, being resourceful, things like that, and recognizing, that it is a community. It takes a community. And, we're still, I feel, early innings in the community here, but it certainly is strong, certainly is vibrant. And, as we grow and as more folks kind of look at this as like a viable opportunity or option to kind of go through it, and we have those supports and infrastructure, certainly excited to see how it will evolve here in the future.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in on that too. It really is all about the community and the support that you can get here. And I know Joe had talked a little bit about collabs as well. And I want to speak a little more to that because it really was the reason that I felt able to start the business. You know, I'm a non-tech founder, which, you know, can be pretty daunting. You know, my other business was a service business. It was entirely different. And so going into technology, but just being passionate enough to know that I can figure out how to do it, collabs really was what had initially given me that prompt to, and the support that I needed to do it. And it was, of course, also how I met Joe, which I'm very, very thankful for. And so many of the other people here, you know, there's many founders who, again, are ahead of you and you can get that mentorship from and support. You know, it would be a crazy list of the amount of people who have supported me and provided advice and encouragement and, you know, given us really the ability to understand, you know, the steps that need to be taken and also learn from some of the missteps that people take. And I think really people want to pass that on too. You know, now we can support other founders with the things that we've learned through the time that we have starting these businesses. It's just amazing. And not only that, there's also a ton of financial support as well available. And of course, this is across Canada. I think we're really fortunate here to have so many supports available to startups where you can get non-dilutive funding in many ways, which of course, you know, funding is imperative to the success of a business, especially at the start. So I think we just have an incredible community of people and an incredible amount of resources that you can access.
That's fantastic. Joe,
just the other thing, Rachel, to kind of like another comment on the ecosystem, you know, and what's really interesting is sort of just like when you look at the contrast, if say you go and talk to some founders and tap into some other founder communities in different locations, like say it's like your traditional Silicon Valley, and then you realize like actually that there's a significant difference there, right? I mean, the playbook out of startup for Silicon Valley is much different than it is in Saskatchewan, and I think comes back to sort of our resourcefulness. And because while yes, the ecosystem is maturing and these funds are available, you have to certainly have a bit more knowledge of how to navigate and get them. But a lot of times what I find and what I hear is that, you know, the tech companies in Saskatchewan are actually further along than maybe our peers in other jurisdictions, because we have to validate the ideas. We're generating revenue from customers like before, like we're not pre-revenue, because like, well, getting revenue from our customers is one of the main sources that we need to get. And so when you look at like, well, there's companies out there that don't do that, or there's companies out there that are way ahead, you know, like that's the part that's sort of like, oh, well, this is just how we do it, but it's sort of born out of necessity with that stuff. And so I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, just sort of where we're at and kind of maybe reflective of the ecosystem, but it's certainly good when we go down and be like, oh geez, you folks are further along than I thought, you know. And so I mean,
Tom, that seems like a great reason for the venture capital community to kind of take a look at Saskatchewan.
Absolutely. You got that right, Stephen.
That's fantastic. Just one more follow-up, if you don't mind. Where would you recommend people go to learn what some of those resources are? Do you have individual contacts or places that you would advise that they look at to get more information?
I mean, I'm happy to jump on this one. I think, you know, Rachel alluded to one of it. I think, you know, we've had, if you trace it back even into the 2000s, there was a vibrant, there were tech founders here. There's some people, some of the great tech founders that Tom was discussing earlier when he made that comment started their businesses in, you know, in the 2000s when there wasn't a community built out around that. But to me, as someone who, you know, joined in later to the party, maybe you could say, you know, circa 2017, 18, there wasn't a watering hole where people could gather. You couldn't tell somebody, like, to your question, hey, you know, go attend those events if you want to get interested in tech. And that's really where the business incubators / accelerators really came in. I mean, I alluded to one in my own story, and Rachel alluded to it as well. Collabs in Saskatoon was the brainchild of a few brave individuals, as well as the government of Saskatchewan going in on tech. Down in Regina, we have another incubator called Cultivator, which was spearheaded by Connexus Credit Union, our largest credit union in the province. And as far as I'm aware, the only incubator in Canada run by a credit union. And most recently, we had our university here in Saskatoon, the University of Saskatchewan, greenlight a deep tech incubator for, we'll say, you know, professionals, masters, teachers, et cetera, to commercialize some of these deep research, maybe biosciences, pharmaceutical related companies. And in each case, it's provided a pathway. Collabs has hosted student nights for students from all disciplines who are able to attend an event and see a pathway. like in an area where historically maybe that was just the engineering or the computer science students. I mean, we've had law students attend some of these. I mean, it's pretty out there when you're saying, don't go work at a law firm, go work at a random tech startup instead. That's a viable thing. And it was because we opened up places for the community to come together and to showcase opportunities. So I put those kind of on the map there as well. I'll give another shout out because I'm embedded with them as well. They've been great for capital raising, an organization that operates here in the province and throughout the prairies called Startup TNT that offers sort of networking as well as sort of angel investing and capital resources. They've been good. That organization literally started by saying, we want to get tech focused people together on Thursday nights. That's what the TNT stands for, Thursday Night Tradition. And that just started with pulling together founders as well as angel investors and deploying capital. And I mean, I don't have the exact numbers. They've raised several millions of dollars for Saskatchewan-based companies. I know easily over 100, we'll say high net worth individuals off the sidelines and angel investing. And I think this goes to the point of the community as well. We're continuously going to these watering holes and we're inviting more people in. Like we've now got a bunch of traditional industry individuals who did quite well. They're betting on tech. They're involved in tech. They're allocating money. They're mentoring tech entrepreneurs as well. And so it's great. We see more and more of these sprout up.
Oh, it's fantastic. So maybe we'll link to some of those resources in the post here when it goes up. Joe, to me, doing a tech startup in Saskatchewan would seem like a daunting task. I mean, doing it anywhere is a daunting task. Help unpack a little bit what startup founders should be thinking about from a legal perspective as they get started, as they think about creating their company, as they think about starting to talk to investors. When somebody comes to you and they want to start a startup, what are some of the things that you talk through with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I would say first to any startup founder looking for any professional, I think alignment of sort of the orientation around a startup is really important in that, you know, as professionals, we don't often talk about shared risk with these things. We like to de-risk things. They teach that in law school and in commerce and everything along the line. But I think you need to have somebody with the right mindset for working in a startup. They don't need to necessarily have the same kind of outsized maybe risk profile as the founder or whatnot, but you certainly need somebody who understands what it means to be going through and bootstrapping a company with your own funds and appreciating that there's a complex bevy of needs for these companies that want to globally scale. And they're going to have more complex, again, Rachel and Tom's companies are going to kick up more complex legal needs than an established, you know, manufacturing or construction company that's been around for 50 years have. The difference is the latter company's got a war chest of money to pay professionals. And Tom and Rachel, quite rightfully, even if they have the money, they want to optimize. Nobody wants to overpay on professional items. And certainly I don't want to bill anybody for areas I don't value add in. So I think orientation is right first. I would say to founders watching this, you know, interview your professionals. You're going to find out pretty quick whether they're going to talk like a lawyer or like an accountant, or whether they're actually going to buy into this idea. Beyond that, I sort of almost phrase these around the people you will meet on the journey of startup, in that in the beginning you have founders. And so we deal with formation issues. What's the relationship? What are the battle plans and the expectations among the mavericks who are going to go set out and change the world? And then it moves on to, well, we're going to need some more people. So then you have employment issues, and we have to deal with sort of strengthening the legal DNA of a startup so they can attract and retain talent. Then you move into the next person on the journey, the investors. We talked about venture capitalists, angel investors, strategic corporate investors and whatnot. This is always the rocket fuel that the startups think of. And so we get into capital raising discussions and managing control and ownership dynamics in a company as well. Of course, the customers relationship that we talk about, that we heard from Tom and Rachel chatting about, and the fascination with solving people's problems along the way. So how do we help as legal counsel in reducing the friction on the road to yes? Tom was talking about landing a new client in the UK. How do we help accelerate that opportunity as legal professionals so we're not bottlenecking, you know, what could be the next stage of the evolution for the company? And then on the far end, buyers. Some companies will exit. And so are we setting up the company with good corporate hygiene for success, so that makes them a appealing startup thing. But, my last comment on this, despite, regardless of all of those stages, I really think the key one is mental agility. There's this term sometimes used of, the map is not the territory. And in this case, I'd say just knowing a playbook isn't a guarantee of tackling a do or die problem. You want to have some plans, but you need to be agile, and you have to appreciate the business topography, the mountains, the valleys, everything in between that you're going to have to navigate on the path to success. And you're going to have to do that as a professional to be able to deliver value to founders.
Yeah, what I love about that, Joe, and I have a legal background as well. Rachel, you have some legal background as well, and I think it's a natural inclination for lawyers to just want to keep their clients safe. So sometimes lawyers tend to look at it from a perspective of, what are the guardrails? How do we limit things? How do we overly protect our client, which is great. But there's another lens you can put on, which is really how do we enable the business to accelerate, to your point. So I love how you look at the legal profession as something that could accelerate a startup's journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, we serve an important role in risk mitigation, or as Tom and Rachel have heard me say, identifying pits of hell, and making sure founders don't fall in them. But there is this side too, where, you can either focus on downside or upside. And as a professional, you're being counted upon to identify some of the downside, but you can really unlock value and take yourself to the next level if you can really speak to the upside of it. And, I was also going to throw in a point on this, in advance of this thing, I was pulling out some quotes. I'm going to paraphrase a quote from a well-known angel investor from the Valley named Jason Calacanis. And I like this quote, but I'll apply it to startup lawyers, quote, "As a startup lawyer, it's my job to support founders when no one else believes in you. And that's the most thrilling professional work in the world." And I honestly believe that. And I believe that you want someone on your team that's going to care about you in those early innings when your company name isn't on banners or all across ads on the web and whatnot. And it means so much more if you can get somebody on your team that is invested in the mission too, as opposed to making a quick buck.
I love that quote. Shout out to JCal there. I like it. Tom and Rachel, I'm curious about this from your perspective, from the client side. Where are some of the points in your journey where you've really leaned on legal expertise? How have you felt that, if you have, accelerate your business success? And are there things that you would have done differently along the way, legal services that you would have engaged that you maybe didn't? And Rachel, maybe I'll go to you first for this one.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, I think Joe did a really good job of explaining a lot of the points in the experience that you might need somebody, whether it's contract, sale of business, investment, anything like that. And so I've been really fortunate to work with Joe on many, many things, especially, when it comes to selling my previous business and also venture capital and everything from contracts to terms and conditions. And, the list really goes on of the supports that are needed. And I think for me, looking back on really both of the businesses, with my first business, again, that one was actually a fully bootstrap business. So I bootstrapped that the whole way until I sold it. And I really did and navigated a lot of those things on my own, which in hindsight, probably wasn't necessarily the best call. And I'm sure it slowed things down. I did all of the incorporation stuff on my own, the company set up, everything. And I had no experience or knowledge in doing this. So looking back, and then seeing how everything went with Cadence, and Joe has supported me right from the start. So this was a relationship that, again, was built through collabs, and I always had the support that I needed every step of the journey. And, I can't thank you enough for that, Joe, because it made things move quicker. It made the whole process easier. And it also just I think one thing that I appreciated probably the most about the services with Joe specifically is I do care to learn. You know, I'm not someone who always just wants everything done for me necessarily, but also having the chance to sit down and talk with Joe about why things are done in a particular way or how we want to approach things together. I always felt like there was just such a good open line of communication, even if it was just, you know, questions about a particular thing that doesn't actually need to be resolved, but something that I'm looking to understand better. So I really feel like the difference between probably not getting the support I needed in my first business until the very end, until I sold it, versus getting the support that I needed right from the start, it really completely changed how I approach things too. So yeah, I think I would definitely encourage people, if they can, to seek the support earlier, make sure you get things set up correctly. It'll definitely prevent a lot of missteps that you could definitely avoid. And, you know, with people like Joe who are willing to work with companies that are newer, as you said, and also in a way that can work in the startup phase. And, you know, everyone benefits over time, of course, as things change. But I think that was so incredibly important for me to be able to do that.
That's fantastic. And Tom, you?
Yeah, you know, so kind of picking up where Rachel talked about, and it's interesting, kind of a different approach, you know, like I kind of view a lot of times some of these legal requirements are like, well, let's get through them and let's get on to the other stuff, you know. And so one of the things, like obviously there's a lot of legal requirements like that are kind of moments in time, moments when you're getting started, moments when you're setting up your ESOP, moments when you're, you know, going through your employee packages and this and that, and fundraising, you know, the kind of the recurring legal need that we have in our business is really around contracting, particularly, you know, as we're going into jurisdictions and particularly as we're dealing with these large enterprise organizations where, you know, a healthcare system out of the US has very different contracting requirements and needs. And so that's something that we've probably spent the most time on with Joe, kind of going through that. And the one thing that I appreciate, and this is, I don't know, I think Joe, I might butcher this, but you said, you know, lawyers can't help themselves but argue about reps and warranties, you know, and like there's like this element that it's like we could spend a year negotiating this contract, and all the while, you know, the business is going to suffer because of it. And so that there is a certain amount of risk that we have to get in and identify, and we have to get comfortable with it. And it's really kind of being pragmatic about how we're approaching it, so that you know, we're setting up the business to succeed, but we're also understanding what matters, what's important, and where it's safe to kind of give on, you know, what is that business decision. And that's one thing I really kind of appreciate, is just that pragmatic approach. And this is the other advice that I'd say, like, yes, there is this whole legal path that companies, startups need to go on, but you know, understanding when you need to engage in those items is what I certainly value. Because yeah, you know, like when you're starting, there's so many things you need to do, and yes, you need to mitigate your risk, because there's some big pits of death that are doing, you know, as Joe says, that are out there you have to navigate. But if you're not up against them, or if you're not coming up on them, they're not on your path, they're ways away, you need to focus on growing that business and these other things, you know. And so you can sink a ton of time and resources in de-risking the business from a legal standpoint that doesn't really serve you. And so I kind of always come back to this, like, at what time, when do you need to do these things, and having enough warning and being able to do them and approach them. And so that, yes, you know, a lot of these future risks are really going to be symptoms of success. If you don't have that success, they're not going to come up. And if you don't optimize and prioritize like ways to be successful, so that does become an issue, you know, you don't want to lose sight of that. And so that's something that just as far as like being able to manage, you know, at what time when you need to do it. And that being said, you know, I probably would give my earlier self some advice about like get started earlier on some of those things. But you know, by and large, like kind of recognizing that things unfold in due process, and that's okay.
And I'll just, before going back to you, Stephen, just kind of dovetail on two comments, one that Rachel made and the one that Tom made. Just on Tom's point about this, is that there's a time and place for any one of these things. And you know, one of the most common legal presentations I give is this one called Legal at Scale. And it was because you get again, no offense to anybody, but you get blog posts, you get other sorts of articles or whatnot, and it sounds great, and the founders read it and they go, oh, that sounds like something I should care about. But it's not relevant to today. And it's not relevant to your stage of business. It might be interesting to listen to the person who's got $1 billion company talking about acquisitions, but that's not relevant to today, to this, you know, Series A, Series C, you know, $1 million, $2 million revenue company or whatnot. So tailoring solutions to what's required today and maybe the next leg in the journey, I think is also a really important thing for professionals. And then just ties back to Tom's point about you can add value when you're not just saying, oh, you could do all of these things, spanning the gamut from day one infancy to publicly traded company. That's not helpful. So that's the first one. And then the other thing is back to Rachel's point on the explaining thing. And we really try to do this. There's a big education mandate that I think gets lost by professionals. It's like that old, teach a man to fish quote. And a lot of this goes back to, we use this in our tech group as part of our, whatever you want to call it, mission, vision statement type thing. We empower those who dare. And I've used that wording over and over again, because what I want to educate and empower founders to understand legal issues and problems. Not because I want them to DIY it. I think we still add value, but because I'm not on the front line. Rachel and Tom are on the front line with their teams. They see the issues. I hope when an issue arises, we have a conversation, but I'm also perfectly fine if we built a robust process to empower the sales representatives to be able to close that sale, or empowers HR to deal with, ESOP related issues or something like that. I don't have to be we don't as professionals have to be a jealous guardian of every legal deliverable. I think we can do a lot to strengthen the know-how of our clients when it comes to some of these issues. So.
I love that. Joe, maybe one quick follow-up for you. I'm just curious, it seems like at each stage of a startup's journey, it's dealing with things that it never dealt with before, right? It's growing in complexity and the need for legal services changes significantly. Can founders expect to sit down with their lawyer and have a conversation about what that might cost? Like, hey, we're doing another funding round, we're doing whatever next big milestone. They have to have some sort of budget certainty, right, of what that might cost. Can they sit down with an individual such as yourself and have an upfront discussion about what they should be planning for? And what are the best practices around that?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll say it this way: just because the person's wearing a vest, and you can't quite see it, but I am wearing a vest, doesn't mean you can't ask them how much they charge. I think people understand lawyers are expensive, and they get intimidated by the fact that lawyers are expensive, and they shy away from asking the question because they sort of feel like a person in a luxury shoe store. If you have to ask, you can't afford it. But certainly if you run into a lawyer like that, I mean, I'll just be blunt, I think you should run away. If they're not going to talk about price transparency with you, and they don't appreciate that you're bootstrapping a company and you have to budget like everybody else on this earth, then you should find somebody else who's willing to do that. And competition in the marketplace is fierce for good startup technology lawyers and whatnot. And that, I think, is a benefit to founders, where certainly all the good startup lawyers I know will be happy to look at alternative billing arrangements to the almighty billable hour at times. Sometimes that works fine, but we do a lot of project-based stuff. When it comes to raise rounds, I'm often quoting, I break it down into different milestones, and I have sort of fixed amounts on that. And frankly, we've just been around the block long enough to know that this is probably how this, for example, raise round is going to go. And maybe if it builds out some unforeseen item or whatnot, maybe we're willing to take on the risk with that. Or if it was just something that wasn't, brought to our attention on the beginning. I didn't invent the concept of change orders, but that can be useful just to kind of stop and say, hey, when we started this process, we've had these assumptions baked in. Now things have changed. Let's talk about it. How do you want to deal with that? So certainly people shouldn't shy away from having, pricing, cost, transactions. And they certainly, back to something Rachel alluded to, in the early innings, they certainly shouldn't shy away from any law firm that holds itself out as supporting startups from asking for things like concessions until a major raise round, or startup packages, or some way to get the service without running it on I'm a great person with a great LinkedIn profile and I'm $1,800 an hour and that's that. You can be a more discerning customer, and you should be. You owe it to your team to be more discerning.
Those are great points, Joe. I just love how you called out that there's options, even in billing. Like there's different pricing options for lawyers, and if you get something on an hourly basis, you can ask them what it might cost if they did it on a project basis. That's fair game, absolutely. So I want to transition to the future now and ask everyone to kind of take out your crystal balls for a minute, and I'm going to focus on your companies, Tom and Rachel, first for just a minute. Looking out the next 5 years or whatever horizon you want to choose, Where do you see your company going? What are your aspirations for the company? And maybe Rachel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, happy to start. So really, when I think about Cadence and what I want the company to be and what we're going to make it is really a system that actually entirely changes this process. Because as I said, right now, it is antiquated, it's broken, you're dealing with hundreds of stakeholders, and it is actually just frankly broken. And so I think of it akin to what the tax software did. First it made a system easier, but you still had to print and mail your tax filings to the CRA. And so it's really about how do we actually impact change? And of course, this is a long-term goal, but it's like, how can we integrate with the federal government and with all of these different systems in a way that we can actually change the way people deal with? And then in that case, then you become the centralized hub when it comes to dealing with deaths, because it's just, in my view, such a broken system as it is today. And it needs to change because our lives have become more complicated. Death has become more complicated. We are dealing with so many more things. And so, of course, today we're meeting the process where it's at and automating and accelerating it as best we can. But there's still a lot of work that we can do in that. And that's really what our big focus is.
And Tom?
Yeah, so I got kind of two categories here to
Yeah.
kind of approach. One is just very specific to our company, our size, where we're at. We're at the stage where we've unlocked product market fit. We have the value prop well defined. We've got case studies going there. And so really now, like our next goal as an organization is really trying to optimize that scale and growth. And so that certainly is an exciting curve as we roll out in this technology to as many organizations and help as many hospitals as we can as far as filling these vacant shifts. On that sort of the product side, in terms of that evolution, like there's just a massive opportunity. Staffing has been listed as the #1 issue facing hospitals for the second time in the last 2 years. And so, how we can help impact and provide help care for the folks that are caring for the folks that are in these hospitals is certainly important to us. And so there's certainly a lot of opportunity as we look at some of these antiquated processes and systems within staffing. And as we're automating them, we have a real opportunity to connect, the workers and the employees to a schedule that works for them, both as sort of these shifting dynamics in terms of expectations and needs around that work life, that schedule balance. And so we really find ourselves in a very interesting intersection where we're going to make a big impact and positive impact in a number of people's lives, both in the employees of our customers, but also then in the patients that they serve. And that's incredibly exciting. And there's so many opportunities to unlock it. And so in a lot of ways, and we're 10 years old, but this is day one. This is like in terms of excitement and awe about what we're doing. And so it's incredible, and so then that organization, building that organization to be able to deliver that, at scale is a very exciting opportunity here that we're working on. So those kind of two pieces go hand in hand, and it's a nice place to be here after all these years to kind of be working on that. So,
are we going to see more hospitals in the UK breaking for Andgo?
Yeah, absolutely. So the UK one's kind of interesting. It's just there's some healthcare systems here that have some locations over there, and so that's kind of how we got into there. But now that we're there, it's easy to expand, and so. We'll always pick up the phone, but as far as right now, our focus is on that North American expansion, just as far as we're good for it. But yeah, definitely open for it.
And actually, one more question on that to both of you. You're Canadian, Saskatchewan-based companies, but you're both operating in the US. How much growth are you expecting from that market in the next few years?
I'm happy to talk.
So go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to say, for us, of course, the Canadian market is wonderful, but, when you think statistically, of course, the US market is a much wider, larger market for us. And I mean, I don't always like to think about, because obviously what we do is related to death. So, I never like to think about it in that way, the numbers of deaths, but sadly, obviously death rates are increasing, as the population is aging and we're seeing the baby boomers. So it's definitely going to have a shift. But for us, of course, I'm always sensitive to the fact that, it is a touchy subject when you're thinking about things by way of death. But again, it's something that is a certainty for all of us. We're all going to encounter it with loved ones and with ourselves. And so to me, to do a service in that area is something that's so important and something that, is really near and dear to me. So, but when it comes to growth, obviously the US is going to be a significant opportunity for Cadence.
As far as us, and in a lot of ways that there's a lot of similarities, like the tools that we built for our Canadian customers have been advantageous and useful for US customers and vice versa. And so, that border is kind of interesting, just, more of a reflection of different markets of where opportunity comes from. And to Rachel's point, certainly, right? Just from a size standpoint, it certainly tilts towards the US. So, we'll certainly look at kind of continuing to pursue that. One thing about Andgo is that we have 100% customer retention, and so anyone who's ever started to use Andgo still does to this day, right? Just sort of speaks to the stickiness of the solution and the problem that we're solving. And so, to that point, always going to have a very big soft spot for all of our Canadian customers who took an early chance on us and helped us sort of grow up and solve this. And because of that commitment, because of that foresight, we're able to go out and offer this solution to the rest of North America, and the other institutions throughout, the US are going to be able to benefit from that. So that certainly is exciting. And so I kind of think of it as one and the same, kind of linked, as it's more of a North American type market, but we're able to kind of serve both through that same solution. And so, that's the way we look at it.
Great. Well, one of the great things is that you've already broken into, both of you, multiple markets and are winning there. So you're both positioned for a lot of success here. That's great. Joe, I'm curious for your take as you look into your crystal ball. You are a thought leader in the technology law community as well as the legal technology community. I'm curious about where you see legal technology going in the next couple of years, particularly with advances in generative AI and large language models, and how you expect that might change the way that you work with startup founders like Rachel and Tom in the future, or not.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. So first off, this is why I always say please and thank you to ChatGPT, because if it takes over my job, I hope it offers me one in return. But in seriousness, I don't think we're going to see that. Hitting head on the topical issue as far as AI, there's certainly going to be a role for legal technology based upon AI or more robust, chatbots, et cetera. But it's not going to take away from service delivery. And my first thing before I kind of get into my three main points on this is I always go back to a very personal example that has nothing to do with lawyers. And it's, I'm proud dad to a 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old daughter. And in both cases, when my wife was pregnant, we would go and see the OBGYN for regular check-ins to make sure the baby was doing okay. And they put all sorts of sensors and everything on my wife, and we get sort of the take on, okay, things are going well, there's no issues, everything's along the way. And you know what? The stats didn't matter. The data didn't matter out of it. It obviously would if something was off. What I cared about was our OBGYN, who we trusted, who we thought had our best interests at heart, would just look at us at the end of the meeting and say, everything's good. And it was just that simple wording of saying everything's good from somebody I trusted and respected, regardless of the fact that maybe in some future thing, there could be a scan or other things. Maybe I don't even need to see a doctor. That doesn't change the human need to hear those words from somebody who wants to help them in a situation that matters. So, and AI is not going to replace that. And then as far as my other main points on technology or whatnot, the one thing I would say to any lawyers as they look at the evolution of legal technology and AI is they need to become better narrators. I think lawyers need to stop thinking of themselves as doers and spend more time thinking about processes and their competitive advantage. If you can narrate out how you want those capital raise documents or that IT contracting thing to come together, you'll have technology to help you in that, but it's still going to be incumbent on you to kind of see that in your mind and then talk through how that's going to be built out and how that materializes. So that's one point on that as far as the narrator end. The second point is, I think as inevitably some maybe lower value, quote, legal work gets commoditized, it's going to be incumbent on professionals to add more value. And the way that I often think about that is by adding more value through an appreciation of more perspectives. There's a term that Warren Buffett's business partner, Charlie Munger, uses about a lattice work of mental models, sort of like the crisscrosses on my obnoxious suit that I'm wearing today. And what I'd say is if you're focusing now on the lines on this thing is, legal is just one of these lines. And maybe there's another line that's like financial and HR and some things like this. The key point is the strength comes from the interconnection of all of these perspectives that makes it strong. If you just have one wins, chaos, market adversaries or whatnot, push that aside. You need to appreciate all of these. And so I think I'm a pretty good lawyer, but I spend a lot of time trying to understand the issues of, how does the accountant think? How does the engineer think? How does the HR professional think? And I'm not trying to step into their roles, but I think I add more value if I appreciate the issues that they're running into. And then I can have a more discerning conversation with people on, say, Rachel or Tom's team if I appreciate where they're coming from. And then the final point, as far as which isn't even necessarily a non-tech point, is I think this is also going to make lawyers, professionals writ large, focus on their why. There's that now infamous speech that Simon Sinek, the business guru, gave like years ago, where he talked about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think lawyers are going to have to move beyond saying, well, I'm a lawyer and I help incorporate companies, to something like, I empower startup founders to accelerate their businesses. Because AI is going to keep commoditizing the what portion of that, but I'm really bullish on human beings having a competitive advantage when it becomes to the why. So I think all lawyers and all professionals are really going to have to dig in on their why in an age of AI.
That's fantastic. Tom and Rachel, I'm curious from your perspective. I assume it doesn't matter to you who does the work. If AI is taking on more of the work, that's great. What types of things would you expect to still go to a lawyer for? I assume that there's some business advice, some like I've seen it before, some guidance that you would still see value in going to a lawyer from, even if maybe the first draft of a contract is being done by generative AI as opposed to a lawyer, and then a lawyer is reviewing it. But I'm curious for your perspective there.
I can, great question here. And I like kind of what Joe sort of mentioned there. I feel like, who knows what that future looks like for this sort of stuff. And as far as like a tool helping, like if it proves to have utility, I'm certainly all for engaging and utilizing it. I think if it can add value, let's bring it in and let's use it. I think like sort of the biggest thing, the busy work, kind of the maybe a bit more of sort of the chore aspect of sort of drafting, documenting all this other stuff. And I think what the potential that maybe has me excited about is if we can eliminate that in part of our interaction and elevate our time together to talk about strategy, to talk about approach, to talk about, some of these things that matter, and leave that work to the generative AI that can handle kind of that sort of important, but maybe not as additive as some of those other things. I think that's certainly what I'd be interested for it. Stephen, you hit it on the head. Like I don't really care where the work or the idea comes from, whatever that outcome is, like I'm happy to leverage the benefits from it. But as far as like time with Joe and times with other folks there, if we can use that AI to elevate our time to focus on some of those key things, I think that certainly is exciting and appealing.
I would say I completely agree with both Joe and Tom in what they're saying too. And I think that there's a place for it for sure. And there's no doubt that it is going to impact some level of change. Yeah, whether that's through some level of contract automation. Again, you can't really deal with negotiations with AI. So, again, there's a human required with certain things. But I think it really actually could have a positive impact on the relationship that we have with our legal professional. Really, it's exactly what Tom said about, if some of that kind of busy work can help be looked after individually, and then you actually have time with your legal or with your lawyer, then at least you can collaborate a little bit more on the things that really matter, that you actually have to dive into deeper and understand, more fully, whether it's a more complex situation with a customer or with an employee or whatever the situation may be. So Although I think when I'm thinking about something that would be nice to see is, if there are just general legal questions that can be answered pretty simply with AI or something, and you're just curious about something, and that could be a really quick, easy way to automate that. I think that there's opportunities there. So I think if anything, it'll have a positive influence on things. And again, as Joe said, digging into the why, I think is really important. We should all do that. I know I think a lot about that. I'm sure most of us do. Why do we do the things we're doing, and what is the value that we're trying to bring to people? And if you can really hone in on that, there'll certainly be no negative implications in my view.
Well, this has been a really fun conversation, and I'm just really excited by the successes that you all had. It's great to hear about the vibrancy of the startup community in Saskatchewan, and Saskatoon in particular. Tom, for you, I mean, it just seems to me like your company is really hit its stride, and you're seeing global expansion now, and you're solving such a very real pain point, and it's great. That's great to see. I mean, Rachel, I mean, you're a founder who's had success in the past. You've had a successful exit. You're doing it again. You're already expanded into the US. You're solving such a real need at such an important time in people's lives. It's fantastic to see. And Joe, I loved throughout our conversation about how you talked about your passion for working for entrepreneurs, and just the reason and sense that you bring to it. And clearly the testimonials from Tom and Rachel show what a valuable part you've been of their team. So it's been an honor for me to have this conversation. I encourage everyone to go out and look at your websites for more information about your organizations. Maybe one last question for me. If people want to follow you on social media, where's the best place to do that? Is it on LinkedIn? Is it one of the other social media platforms? I'm sure people would love to get more information about you, and just follow your company's development in real time. And Tom, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. So our LinkedIn is probably the place where we're the most active, just given our audience and who we're focusing on. And so that's Andgo Systems at LinkedIn, and I'm on there as well, Tom Ross. So yeah, please reach out if you have any insights, questions, or thoughts. Happy to connect.
Fantastic. And
Yeah.
Rachel, you?
For me, LinkedIn as well is the best place to connect, whether it's with the company under Cadence Cares handle, or else with me directly, and also really open to conversations and building new relationships. So yeah, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, and for us, all social media platforms, although I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. You can look up the firm, Saskatchewan's top technology and startup law firm, McKercher. You can also look me up. My handle on pretty much all social media platforms is at Prairie Tech Law. Along the way, although if you look me up on Instagram, you'll just see picture after picture of me smoking briskets. So that won't have anything to do with law, but it'll make you hungry.
Motivational in its own way. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.